I think I'm outliving most of the people that would remember me. I mean, you know.
Christ-like.
Love. Love. Love.
Wow. Joyous Christian.
Boisterous and very tall. A little crazy.
This guy can't be real.
The personification of Jesus.
Ron's great, but without Doris, he's nothing.
During the early 1970s, the Holy Spirit fell on the worldwide church and brought revival. In church history, the period is referred to as the Charismatic Renewal. This is the story of the rector God brought to El Paso, Texas, to shepherd St. Clement's through one of the most extraordinary of times.
I was born in Coffeyville, Kansas, about 9 miles from the Oklahoma border. It's where the oil boom was. That's where my dad went. He was a roustabout, and that introduced me to the oil field. When I was 14, I went in the oil patch. Friday nights, I'd get in the back seat of the car, take a nap, wake up, either going to visit somebody or moving to another town that Monday. And make instant friends because you're not sure you're going to see them the next day. Yeah. Let them know who you are, what you're about, quickly, relational. That helped. And of course, I loved her. Started knowing her in the 7th grade. And then by the 8th grade, I already made my decision to marry her. And I asked her, and she said no. And I had a paper route, I had a motor scooter. My mom and dad had just done my bedroom. I mean, I had walk around money. God, what else could she want than me?
Oh, but this was during the war. The Second World War, not the first. and our lockers were outside. You remember there was all kinds of rationing. Ron would get those huge Hershey bars.
Black market.
And he put them in my locker.
We would spend an hour a day on the phone.
Party line, too.
After graduating from high school, Ron went off to UT Austin for college and was fraternity brothers with Maynard Haddad.
The Episcopal chaplain was our sponsor for our fraternity. And he would take us every Sunday, those of us that could sing. Maynard was never invited. And we would go to little churches all around Austin and sing for our lunch. And I think the Lord itched me a little bit there, but my temper got me into a fight in college, and I lost this tooth. And then later on in the oil field, I lost sight in this eye with temper, beating on my machine, my ditching machine.
The flame between Ron and Doris that was kindled in middle school was revived when Ron was home from college in 1952.
I was riding down the street on the bus, and I saw Ron on the corner. And it was like a voice saying, that's the one you're going to marry. We got engaged that summer and got married in
1952. I was 20, she was 19. and the fun thing is, she and my 5-foot German mother go to get the wedding license because in Texas, the guy has to be 21. I was 20 and in school. And so here's my mother holding Doris. Yeah. We are here for a wedding license?
No, she didn't talk with an accent. I came from a very unhappy marriage with my mom and dad. And so I remember deciding when I was like, 13 or 14, I'm going to get married and I'm going to have a happy marriage.
My temper was not very good, but she helped me to give that up. If we would ever have a therapeutic conflict, I would mention the word divorce, stomp out, stomp back in, and we'd pick up where I'd stomped out.
There were several times after we were married that we stayed up all night.
She had to raise me.
The early years of marriage were not easy. Ron, searching for the right fit, tried numerous careers, while Doris raised 3 children, Reed, Rhonda, and Brenda.
One vacation, we went to Colorado, and we were eating breakfast like at a diner, and Dad looks out the window, and this guy's riding by on horseback, and all the horses are going down the middle of the road. They had gotten out. And Dad runs out there to help the guy, jumps on a horse bareback and helps him round up these horses.
A lot of people would say, didn't you hate being a preacher's kid? When they met my dad, they'd go, oh, never mind.
Him and Doris raised chickens. and so he was in the chicken business for a while. He worked with his dad in construction, pouring slab foundations. He worked in a dry goods store in the men's department. The next thing you know, he wants to become a minister.
The call came and bore fruit. At 27, we had our 3 children, 6, 4, and 2. And I had said to Doris one day coming in from the oil patch, and I said, "Hon, when I'm older, maybe 40, I'd like to maybe consider changing vocations and maybe consider the ministry."
My point of view is that if you are fortunate enough to feel called into a field, you don't just stand around and wait and put it off 20 years. Then Ron had to have a psychiatric test before, and he flunked it.
Yeah.
This is when he still had a temper.
Oh, yes.
And when he would get hungry, he would get mad.
However, Ron was ordained January 5, 1964, and he and Doris served in churches in Corpus Christi and New Braunfels, Texas, before they received the call to St. Clement's.
Before Ron came, it was a period of American history that was very tumultuous, and that extended to the church. It was a period of darkness, actually, at St. Clement's. They had recently fired a rector. The headmaster was in trouble. The congregation was at odds with each other as well.
My desire was to go, to be called, but to be able to stay. I mean, here we were at this little church and walked into St. Clement's, and it was so beautiful and so big.
It was like, we need a clergyman, yes, but don't get in the way, because there was so much lay leadership.
So the same year we arrived, Ron and Doris arrived, went to St. Clement's, and were surprised at the coldness.
St. Clement's was dead as a doorknob.
I was raised at St. Clement's, and I thought I was always a believer, but I found out later on that I didn't know much, and I didn't know what belief really was.
My first Sunday was wonderful. I can remember the sermon. I said, you know, it's like baseball. Ball goes out of the weeds, you get the ball, and then you have to make a choice whether to throw it back in or just hold it. So what are we going to do at St. Clement? Are we going to play ball? Or are we going to just hold what we've had?
And when we got here, they had announced that we were going to have this Faith Alive.
But that was kind of frightening for the congregation because it was a very private faith.
January of 73, we had our first of 3 Faith Alives here, and it changed lives like you would not believe.
I was in tears the whole weekend.
Ron has said, frankly, he didn't really have a personal relationship with Jesus before that time.
We set up fairly close, and Melanie was probably the first one to get up, thinking she'd probably be the only one. And at the service we were at, probably 80 to 90% of the people went up for prayer.
The Holy Spirit came on a lot of people here, and that didn't necessarily happen everywhere they had a Faith Alive.
We do know of several ladies who have passed who had prayed 2 years before we came for renewal for St. Clement.
There were people that got up and asked each other for forgiveness, to be reconciled.
We made commitments of faith and Faith Alive in January, and then by the spring, people were encountering the Holy Spirit in new ways, sneaking off down the hall and being baptized in the Holy Spirit.
There was just a hunger for people to be in the Word. There was Bible studies that started up all around.
We were taking, our little white Bibles that we got at confirmation off the shelves and opening them up for the first time. And then he also introduced a course called Life in the Spirit, which was very popular at that time. We even considered, amazingly, that we were going to buy the building across the street from St. Clement's, make it into apartments, and then we would all live together.
Men were hugging each other.
This was no longer just a church. It became a family, a lifestyle.
But not everyone welcomed the revival coming to St. Clement's.
Not everybody was happy with some of the things that were going on. And so he had to deal with, almost different congregations under the same roof.
Too spooky for him. The guys that were real charismatic, he wasn't moving fast enough.
I thought, what is happening in this church and what have they done with the Episcopalians?
As a cohesive community began to form, God expanded the influence of St. Clement's.
One of the first things we did was start the mission board. It's sort of given the character of St. Clement's.
In about 15 years, we were supporting 68 missionaries. There were Jesus rallies around town. For the first time, churches were really connecting with each other. That actually was the beginning of what would be city movements for years to come.
St. Clement's was given the license to operate the first Christian television station in the borderland. It was called KSCE, or K St. Clement's Episcopal.
When we first went on the air, El Paso was a very dark city. I realized that the Lord had given the station to be a catalyst to unite churches and hit this region with one very fierce light.
Surprisingly, after 8 years, Ron accepted a call to another church, but God had other plans.
Ron had actually come to a group of us and asked us to pray about it with him, because he had made the comment that he needed to go and learn some things. My comment to Ron was, I do believe that God has a lot of things to teach you. Do you want to learn those with new people or with the people that love you?
Once the honeymoon has worn off in a congregation, then begins the real work of community.
I felt so blessed that I was where I could grow spiritually, where I could meet the Lord, where I could see Him and other people.
And be.
For the next 17 years, Father Ron and Doris served faithfully.
My daughter was a teenager. One summer she said, "Mom, Carolyn and I, we want to be acolytes." And I was going, that's only for boys. Why can't we be acolytes? I said, well, okay, go ask Ron. His answer was, you'll have to get the answer from Bishop Trelease, but go for it. So then they wrote Bishop Trelease. And sure enough, he writes back, yes, they can be acolytes.
My sister came down with cancer. Ron, when she was in the hospital, went to see her every day.
He married me and Mary. He married our children. He baptized all our grandchildren. He buried Mary's parents.
Ron has been with us through the birth of our children. He's baptized them, confirmation, marriages, and deaths. And he's held our hand through every one of them.
After 25 years, God was not finished with the ministry of Father Ron and Doris. He just wanted to change the venue.
I knew, coming at 39 and I was 62, I knew that they needed younger leadership. I called Bishop Kelcho in Albuquerque and said, Bishop, I need to talk with you. I'm ready to retire. And he said, don't go anywhere, Provost, I'll be right there. We came to the house and we're sitting at the table and he said, there are two ways to retire. One, the way you're talking about, and then a good way. Oh, okay. What's a good way? He said, you stay 2 more years, help the leadership. Doris said, Bishop, he's tired. And the bishop turned and said, Doris, I'm talking to your husband.
He said, Doris, you can retire if you're tired.
Another important factor in their decision to retire was the desire to care for their terminally ill son, Reed, who was living in Houston.
Our son was dying in Houston, and I'd take breakfast up. He'd say, Dad, and there'd be Bibles all around on his bed. Mm-hmm. And he'd say, Dad, I wanted to ask you about this and this. He'd been up on it. I said, great questions, Reed. I'll be right back and answer those the next morning. Dad, I was wondering about this. He drove me to the Bible. 2 years we were with him.
One of the most potent memories that I've got of Papa is out on Lake Austin. It was behind my parents' house. We had a little service there for Reed. He opened up his bag of ashes and put it into the river there. And seeing a father spread his son's ashes is something that you never want to see, but even in that, I felt like he was ministering to me, saying that, you know, no loss is too great for God to comfort us through.
It is well with me.
In retirement, Ron ministered to small churches in East Texas and made a lasting impact on his grandchildren.
I was in high school having a little bit of a hard time. He came to Austin, prayed with me, and took me into my dad's office, which typically was not the place that I wanted to go. Him sitting there with me, encouraging me, crying with me, taking me through some deep healing prayer. And I went back into my backyard. He told me to jump in the water, and as the water washed over me, to kind of envision God's grace covering all of my past, present, and future.
He knows the ditches that I'm getting into. He would, you know, just say funny things to me like, "Hey, Luke, let's go sit outside on the back porch and come tell me some lies."
I've told my children this, that the best gift that we can give you is our good marriage.
I've always looked to Papa and Granny and thought, that's marriage right there. When we got married, he said, if you can only say 3 words, it needs to be I trust you to your spouse. Not I love you, but I trust you. And if you can only say 2 words, it's I'm sorry. And if you can only say 1 word, because it's just one of those knockout, drag-out fights, just look him in the eyes and say, you. Because at the end of the day, that's what the relationship is about, is serving the other person.
After several years of ministering in East Texas, God called Father Ron back to El Paso.
And so we said, well, we would like to go back to El Paso.
At a certain point, Ron came to me and said, would you mind if I came back to St. Clement's? And I said, well, that would be fantastic.
And Dr. Cobb was here. And so I need to let him know we're coming back. So I asked him to go with me to eat, and we could have a Cobb salad.
Not only did they have their family and grandkids, for them it was coming back to a spiritual community that they had been a part of.
Clay Lowenfield, his son-in-law, who asked me, how do you control Ron? I said, I don't control Ron, I aim him.
I know it's hard to say, well, I no longer am the rector. I'm now emeritus. I know that. I'm no longer the mayor. Ron stopped Marilyn and I as we were leaving the church. And he says, Larry, I've been watching you. Oh, when they pass the plate, everybody else puts something in. But when the plate comes by you, you take it out. You know, that isn't what the Lord intended. I need to remind you that this isn't City Hall.
He kind of is extemporaneous with his leading of liturgy. So what I do in my part is try to start songs. So when he does the words of the offertory, he goes, inasmuch as you do it as one of the least of these, one of the least of this, you do it unto me. And I'm counting it back. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Father Ron's warmth, wit, and spontaneity continues to bless St. Clement's.
The legacy that he's leaving is a wonderful example of how to follow Jesus and love others.
There was one time he came and read to my class. A week later, he came to church, and all my kids were going to lunch, and all the way to lunch, they saw him. So all my kids started running and said, Papa!
Ron and Doris are kind of like my second parents.
He's Batman, I'm Robin. I think when I grow up, I want to be like Ron. And I think when Joan grows up, she wants to be like Doris.
He said, Travis, you know how to get holy water? I was like, you bless it? He said, no, you take tap water, you boil the hell out of it.
A couple years back on Palm Sunday, he came up to me and he's like, give me some Palm Sunday.
When I spend time with him, I feel bad when he has that broken eye.
You know, when we all get to heaven,
and all the elders bow down before the Lord. Back in the back, there's going to be all kinds of turmoil because Ron's going to be back there greeting everyone.
I can't tell him. I just can't tell him.
This is not going to make the film, please.
You can edit this.
I probably shouldn't say this.
There are many. I don't know that I want to tell all of them.
Which I will not share here.
Well, nothing you can print. I'll just tell you half of it.
I can't tell. No, you can't. I mean, I'm not going to tell you.
Even in his jokes, even in his passing comments, I wonder, where did that come from? What's he talking about? I don't get this.
He'll tell a joke, or he'll make a 2-word, just kind of response, and nobody will catch it.
And 30 minutes later or a day later, it'll click.
And then like 5 minutes later, you're like, that was such a good joke.
And then it'll hit one person, you'll see them start laughing, then another person.
Just laugh, because you will get it later.